Hi everyone, I hope you can hear me. I will make sure that I double check the sound with my students before I start talking. Can anyone confirm that you are hearing me well? Okay, excellent. Well, I had a little bit of a nightmare yesterday, last week. So I thank you all for being here today with me. And I I was just checking what is the best way I can help in a piece like this. You have all different levels, and I don't want to necessarily analyze the places that every conductor goes straight to, the very end or the end of the first half, which has an amazing amount of time beating changes. I want to concentrate a little bit of more the technique, how to learn Stravinsky in the most time efficient manner, and uh, learning from my own mistakes too, because um, it depends very much how much time you have. But normally, what you go straight for the numbers, and I keep telling my students, don't be fooled. Numbers are just numbers. They are not necessarily music. And sometimes you need to look a little bit further in terms of what is the real information that the Stravinsky conveying with his time signatures. Um, Before we go straight into 86, a little bit of history. I don't know if you can recall these polymetrical activities in the past, but it all started in opera, of course, because opera was in a way like a movie studio at that time, and the effect of having two different things superimposed to each other in different rhythms was a fantastic effect for an opera. So you have the first example I can think of is Don Giovanni at the very end of Act One, where you have dances in two, dances in three, and 6/8 going like one on top of the other, and of course everything is perfectly aligned. So Mozart is making sure that you can just conduct it, and everything will be nicely together every other beat. However, this idea kept on being revealed, and there's another one in La Boheme, famous end of second act, where you can also hear this march coming at the end of a conversation with Marcello and Musetta, and it's also a wonderful effect. But what happened in terms of symphonic activity? There wasn't that much of a space for such effects. And one composer that is very rarely spoken about is Charles Ives. I came upon this piece called Three Places in New Haven, which is not very well known, but it's one of his most well known pieces. And there's an incredible effect of two marching bands going like in different speeds. So it's very difficult to do. Um, that you may want to look up. It's the second movement. Uh, by the way, I will at some point I will show the links of all these pieces. Of course, Brahms is also another example where you can really think of polymetrical activity. But Brahms was very polite. He always wrote everything in one um, measure, and just making sure that the performer was the one who was supposed to find out how it all worked. So in Stravinsky, um, you have to think Stravinsky was starting his career as a as a composer, and he went straight to stardom. He almost had no time to learn from Firebird, which was his big debut, to write. In 3 years, he was practically completely overwhelmed with work, and and on top of that, they were not only symphonic pieces; they were ballets. Was another pile of difficulties in terms of the when he needed to have the pieces ready, and the process was not so in advance um, as he would have wished. So one can forgive sometimes some decisions that he made, which can be debatable and perfectly understandable from the point of view of the history. Uh, which time signature do you decide upon? Is it the melody or the rhythm? And that's the whole point of this class today. Um, so we're going to start by a place I absolutely adore of this piece, which is number 86. So please open your scores. Um, I hope you can see this well. This is the moment where you have the muted trumpets going in sort of contrary motion, very gently, and starting this uh, almost like a meditation. I find this place has a little bit of a mantra. Yeah. Um, so it sounds like this. Okay, so this is the typical Stravinsky style where you have verses. Remember, I said in my last masterclass in Spanish, um, Stravinsky was looking for a, a new way of communicating music, which was completely devoted of any Western influence. Nothing. And with Hurrich, who was his partner, Nicholas Hurrich, they were trying to find a new way to represent the ancestral Russia. That's the whole point of this piece. And at some point, Hurrich said to Stravinsky, you know, you should look into the Lithuanian literature because they were the last one uh, to become Christians. So in a way, they were looking for this pagan world. Like it's almost like prehistoric for them. And Stravinsky went to Poland and found a little book which was a recollection of Lithuanian folk songs. I do have that book. I found it. I'm going to show some pages afterwards. But the point is, they were they were trying to find a new way to express this music, which was not necessarily narrative in its way. It was more like little blocks which were juxtaposed, uh, and this became practically his trademark as a composer. So you have here, it's a very simple melody. I wrote underneath here, I was sitting at the piano today doing this recording. I realized that if you if you play the B and the A with both hands and you just go parallel, like up in opposite motion with the fingers, you get this little motive. Yeah, it's wonderful. So basically, he's just thinking, what can I do with this B and with this A flat? Oh, maybe I can compose a scale backwards. Yeah, like in reverse with both hands. And well, of course, you have one more note on in the left hand. And this, to me, is like he sets up a mood, a very melancholical and very simple, almost without any rhythm, as I said before, like a mantra. And well, he's presenting the elements in uh, in a very I don't want to say chaotic, but certainly it doesn't give you any input as how the music is composed. So the accompaniment to this is this one. Let's hear it again. Now, Stravinsky doesn't give us any clue as to time beating here. It's just basically uh, we don't know how to divide this. Yeah, but let's keep it open for a second. This question, and this is the accompaniment of this tune. Okay, so basically it's like this diminished fifth and fourth going up and down, yeah, transposing slightly like a second. Um, these are the elements, and we have not a clue how they work together. Let me open my score. So the third element we are going to hear is this little arpeggio. Uh, kind of like a seventh chord. And this is where the class really starts. So when when we start looking at 86, it's very simple. Okay, it's 5, and then it's 6, then it's 5, then it's 5, and then it's 5. There's not a question. But in 87, things get a little bit complicated because we are not sure what is his reference between 86 and the third measure of 80, sorry, from 87 to the third measure of 87. So there's a lot of information, and just by looking at the score, at least it happened to me, it's like, okay, this is 4, this is 5, this is 5. Ah, now we have the theme again. Okay, but what is the relation between all among all these elements? And I went back to the bass and started looking and what how could I rebar this? And this is what I came upon. You can decide if you do 2 plus 3 plus 4 or 3 plus 2 plus 4. But in any case, it's exactly the same music, just that now I have the feeling I understand better. These are 9 beats, and 9 beats which will repeat each other over and over, independently of what's happening with the tune on top of it. So um, we need to find out how the arpeggio functions. And I realized that every time that there was an E flat, there was a resonance of the arpeggio. You can look it up. Yes? It's like it becomes this wave, you know. this flame, and it's very, very, it's always symmetrical. So you hear it. You see, it's always the same. Let's hear it again. Okay, so now we have presented basically the band that accompanies this tune. And how is he repeating the trumpets of 86? The first bar is the same. Second bar is definitely not the same. There's a 4/4, and then he starts writing in a totally different beat in 3/4 for the rest of this little interlude. So let's find out. Just forget the time beating for a second. We have 5 plus 1 rest, then 6, 6. So he's repeating the first phrase, he's breathing, and then he does the one with the G, si la sol fa la fa, si la sol fa la fa, twice. Yeah, so it's basically he repeats the 6/4 twice, and in a way, the first one is almost a 6/4 because it's the 5 plus a little break. However, our mantra does not change. It's always these 9 measures moving slowly at a glacial pace. So here we have now from the first entrance of 87 third bar, that's where you have the horns together with the clarinets replicating what the trumpets were doing. Okay, so this is going to help us understand better that sometimes to learn a piece from Stravinsky, you need to take a breather and not just write numbers straight away. Look at all the elements, see how you can work out the mechano. How do these pieces work together? And then start learning with the phrases, phrase by phrase. And at the end, put the numbers. Yeah, it will work much better. Um, I'm going to jump now to the other big section we are going to be studying today. So 174. Last week not last week, 2 weeks ago, I worked on the main sections of Dans Sacral, and it was all going well. But I've realized that for many of you, these are the places that are often worked upon. All this time, as I say, the time beating changes, they are they are almost hypnotic for conductors. And I remember when I started the piece, I went straight to the sacral and I started just writing down. I was so happy. Then there was one section which I kind of looked as a, yeah, that's that one. It was 174. Very noisy. very hard to understand, at least from the recording point of view. And just, I didn't quite know what to make of it, really. It just felt like a crazy orgiastic moment in between this very sophisticated taran, tiri, taran, and of course the main element of the dance. Um, so I decided to look a little bit further what's happening here. Um, as I said before, 174, in this case, it's different because it starts with the rhythm. And you have this main element, which is one this 5/4 structure. Rata tita 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 rata tita tita rata tita tita. So you have the timpanis too, going like a it's like it's like a big percussion orchestra in a way, with the gong, with the tam tam, and some help from tubas and also basses, cellos, and contrabassoon. So you have this series going. The main subject is five, and then you have the short version, which is the three version. So he's alternating between five and three. Five, three, five, four. So this is the third version of this big percussion moto perpetuo. And here he's just cutting one beat out of the five. So he's using more often the three. And from the third bar, he's going a little bit nuts with eight horns, just playing a D like a I don't know, like a rock band warming up, you know. Da 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 da. So it's almost like a percussion element coming in and just joining this big force. And out of the blue appear these themes, you know. So it's not like you are really expecting it. Yeah, pa, 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 pa. It appears first in the horns, two measures before 176, answered by the violins and the violas, and then in a simultaneous fashion between the violins in pizzicato, which is a little bit funny, and together with a big expansive answer or superimposed entrance of the horns 1, 2, and 5, 6, with pavillon en l'air going full force. So this element is very clear, uh, at least from the rhythmical point of view. Ya, ba, 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 ba. One before 76, ba, 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 ba. You can just pretty much side read this and it functions very well. Um, Up until the second bar of 176. Because unfortunately, Stravinsky leaves us alone with the percussion. And if you look at this particular bar, he made the decision to abandon the percussion to favor the melodic part. This is what I find most important to understand. So when you start conducting this piece, you arrive to this second bar, and then things start falling on their head. So you need to be careful, make sure that you just you keep your beat in a very clear manner, almost fighting against the uh, the the impulse of the orchestra. So what I did, I rewrote this with the time, not with the time beating in mind, but with the percussion in mind. So here is the second measure, and you will notice from the seven, from this measure, second of 176, I wrote 4. Yeah. So bear with me. So now I have a clean score that is exactly what the percussion is doing. So here he did, uh, you can follow either the screen or your scores, whatever you want. For clarity purposes, today we're going to be working a lot with the reduction because I want you to understand how this functions, and then you can expand this to a million instruments. It's not a problem at all. So 176 is our last 5, which correspond to this. And here we start having the different beat. So he does the second series, which starts, by the way, here. It's 5, 4, 4, 4, 3. I have divided this section into 3 little sections. Yeah. And 3, look very carefully in 177 because it has no relation yet to what's in the score. 177 is the last beat of this 3/4. And so, in other words, first beat of 177 is try to sing 177, which sounds like this. Ta-dum, ta-dum, bum, ba, 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 da, ba, 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 da, da, bum, ba, 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 dee, ba, 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 dee, da, bum, ba, 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 bum. It's a folk tune. And you can beat yourself to death, but it's very difficult to feel it. Da-di, da-di, da, upwards. Yes? So, if you follow the percussion, you realize that this is a downbeat for just to learn the music. So my experience more than a theory is if you align the information in this way, and then you go back to the real time beating way, it's very easy to learn. It doesn't take even half the effort. So we arrive here to 177, and it's very simple. The percussion just goes bananas with the 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 measures of 5 straight, no change, and just 1 3 at the very end. Yeah, you can check it up. And it works perfectly. We arrive to 180, yeah, which is the end of the first half of this section. So how do I learn this music? I just start by beating the percussion. 1, 2, 2. Until I really know this phrasing by heart. Then I start adding some elements of the little characters that come in. Of course, you have ta, rum, pim, rum, pa, 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 pa. So this I do with the left hand. Yeah, just making sure that I know exactly where it coincides every single time. So when you start, you can start just by 4 measures and making sure that you know, okay, this is where we're together. This is definitely something to look for. And then I add other elements. You have I forgot to say that there's a counter theme, ta pi pa pam pam, right, which always answers to pam pa 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 pim. So then I add these two elements, maybe one first, and always with the percussion, always with the percussion. Okay, this is the first beat. Okay, now it's on the second beat, and so forth. And after that, I go back to the score and I know the music pretty much, and I beat it. I beat it with the original beating. It takes 20 minutes, I swear. And you can even memorize it because you have everything aligned in your head how it is supposed to go. Let's skip now to the second half. Um, we have new elements here, which are basically uh, this tune we we know from before, and this motive, which comes in the first time in 184 with the trumpet in D. And what is that subject? What is that motive? Very simple. It's like a melodic um, version of the rhythm in the percussion. Tito, tito, tito. Yeah, tito, tito, tata. Now, very, very interesting polymetric activity here. Did it start in 181? So, at some point, I decided I'm going to think of this in one starting with the subject. Same reason as before. Here you have this aligned entrant of the trumpet with the real downbeat of the percussion after the first 5 series. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ba-dum, be-dum, bim, ba, 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 ba. You know, another reason why I'm so convinced, because I looked at the original choreography and they have this gesture with like going cross every two measures. Ti-dum, ti-dum, bim, ba, ba, bi, ba, ba. Just makes total sense. And of course, they never think of this as a one. Dee-dum, dee-dum, beep-bop-bop-bop-bum. At least not the dancers. So here we have the first entire phrase, which goes all the way. Now it gets very hard to read the score here because there's so many elements. Bim, ba, 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 bim, bim, ba, 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 ba. Then Stravinsky waits 4 beats. And then he does another one. Tim, pa, 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 pim. Yes, I will be the documents. Which documents, my dear? This my lecture. Um, I will probably I will probably send a PDF or something afterwards with a link. In any case, this is going to stay recorded, so you can also screen copy if you want. Then he repeats one more time, yam pi pa 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 pa, and then he transposes the phrase with the horns from 2 measures before 84, 184. So we are in pavillon en l'air. Si la si sol da da pa pi si la si sol fa mi sol la si la si sol fa mi sol la. Another entire phrase, which is transposed at the end in terms of register, and then you understand better how this operates with the canon. Yeah, which goes a, a beat apart. Let me see if I have a smaller version of this. Okay, so 181. Now I focused and in the melodic aspect for a second. Here we have the original writing of the canon. If you look at the score 181, you have the first entrance 2 before 182 with the trumpets. It's written maestoso, and then you have the counter melody in the violins and also in the oboes. So basically, you see, it's always going uh, either before or afterwards. Yeah, here is before, here is afterwards. So doesn't give us much help from to understand how this operates. It's just basically in two, and you just go straight. This is the version I did. So here we have the canon starting, and it's basically the same music written in a way that aligns with the percussion. Um, Once you have done this work, which is the, the first step to understand this section, you can color your score, or you can decide which groups belong to which gang. Yes. So you have so many layers here. It's probably a good idea, wise, to maybe do a Xerox once and just color, code color in a way, which instrument is going to be helping who. Um, I cannot emphasize more how much this has helped my memory uh, just by taking the time. You know, when we study pieces that are in different key signatures, you know, we don't expect the pieces to be all in the same key signatures. We know it's very chromatic here and there, and we have to navigate um, with the tonalities and how is this composed? How is this thought out by the composer? Why not the time signatures? Why does it have to be this information and that's it? You know, think once for a second of the music and how these layers are sometimes so independent from one another. There's an interview of Stravinsky where he's talking to Robert Kraft, and he said something like, yes, you know, they were working on Aegon, which is one of his later pieces. And, and he said, yes, in the trumpets here, look, it's easier to read in my manuscript, of course, yeah. And he looks and he said, yes, it's written in three, but don't pay any attention. The important part is here. So, in other words, he understood that the the writing sometimes was not giving all the information that you are supposed to know in order to understand a particular section. And this is why I encourage you to really think about it for a little more and just take the time to to decompose or to recompose the piece the way it makes most sense. Um, I'm going to take a little breather and read some questions if there are some questions. Okay, so Natalia is asking a very, very important question. Uh, how do you talk to the orchestra about this? First of all, do you talk to the orchestra about this? Um, um, I think there are two scenarios. One is a youth orchestra. In that case, I would definitely encourage to explain. I wouldn't go that far as to show them the piece with different time signatures because I think it would make them more confused than anything. In that, I'm a very pragmatical. Um, However, I would definitely uh, uh, maybe like the example I showed, like like it sounds like a folk tune, and that they understand that they have to play it a little bit freer than this vertical like slave like march, that is always this downbeat, and you have to emphasize the downbeat. Definitely that they have a different perspective to to this particular section, because others are very easy to understand. I'm going to talk a little bit about 142 now, um, but for me, 142 is very simple. Yeah, it's just it's wonderful rhythm, and everybody understands. Of course, the threes are unstable, but that's more like a technical um, thing that the orchestra needs to feel until they have the stability of the 16 note going throughout the Don Sacral. But in terms of these other sections, it's very hard to understand, especially if you are only hearing one part of the information, and especially this section in the middle, which is so confusing in terms. It's so loud, you just have the timpanis going nuts. So just making sure that at least you can show some elements uh, by explaining it, but certainly and making them curious, opening the door to the people who are a little bit above curious, and they will come. And this has been my experience. They come and they ask you, so what did you mean by that? How do you feel about this? Really into how come? And then you can show them things. You know, um, don't think I would go that far as to talk 10 minutes about it. Maybe you can do a lecture. Maybe you can invite some people of the orchestra to attend your lecture. That's something that you young conductors now you see this new world opening up now with incredible amount of restrictions, but also there's an open door. uh, it's a time in history really, where um, we are definitely as musicians, as a family, we are going to at least open to this digital world. And why not create little capsules like what I did now, little um, videos, little audios where you can just post in the website where the orchestra can listen. You know, it's not necessarily at the rehearsal. I think that if people want to, like you are here today, for instance, you want more information. You want to know about this piece. You can hear 1,000 recordings. You have everything online to learn, and you still want to have a point of view. Same thing probably with orchestras, which are becoming more and more professional. Um, some of them want more. I remember my dad, he had a score just completely marked of this piece. He was the first cello in an orchestra, a very good orchestra. And but I'm not sure that was the average situation. Nowadays, I think it's becoming more and more average that many people know how to conduct, many people have youth orchestra, they teach, and so forth. So the information you have as a conductor is interesting, and I wouldn't be too shy to present it, but rather how, in which format. How many parts would you divide a rite of spring? Um, Rite of Spring is a piece that is non-narrative. It's uh, you can take any part, put it after another one, and it kind of works. Uh, so it's a very mosaic, very cubist. So I I'm not sure I have really thought about that in terms of probably I would say four big sections. Um, and uh, to be honest, I've thought of more rehearsal time and which parts you can pretty much side read and which parts you will have to work harder on. Like let me go to the webcam. It's better. Um, but Dans Sacral is definitely about a third of the rehearsals. The opening, you need to make sure that you spend time because that's more like nerve wracking for the soloists. They need to feel the flow of this beginning until they are comfortable. Some sections are very easy. Jump, 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 bump, bump, bump. That just goes, no problem. End of the first half is hard, and beginning of the second half, it's slow but it's delicate, very impressionistic. Don't forget, Debussy was there with Yagilev playing four hands with Stravinsky when they did this piece together. Um, it was they were very close. So there's a lot of impressionistic element that you have to also get. And because the piece is so hard on the instruments, especially the strings, it takes a little bit of effort to have a very delicate sonorities. So in that respect, make sure that you pace not so much the time, but which sections you do before the other one, because otherwise you're going to get a little bit in a nasty touch from your string players. Okay, let me try to understand this question. Understanding the score can't express all the ideas for Stravinsky needs. Well, I can tell you that his theory was that pretty much everything was written in the music. At least that's what he said. Um, I'm not sure, Fernando. Maybe you can write the second part of the question in Spanish, because I'm not sure I am understanding completely what you mean. Okay, so uh, this question: when you conduct this piece, what do you keep in your mind, not to confuse yourself with the sound of the music of the orchestra? Oh, that's a good question. That's a very good question, because in rehearsals, there are things that will produce instability, and that's the last thing orchestras want. They want they want to rely on your beat, and they want to make sure that what you are conducting is going to eventually become the sonoric information around them. Therefore, in rehearsals, you have to, more than what you listen to, you have to have a plan. And the plan has to be very cool headed. Just don't come to this piece with a hot temper on the first rehearsal. I mean, not maybe the first rehearsal, but certainly stay calm and be a little bit Boulez like, make sure that the things are under in terms of the dynamics, and that people know who they have to rely on for the ensemble. Uh, in terms of my own concentration, um, I would say you need to be 250% secure with this piece, so that even if something happens, you are absolutely sure, first of all, immediately, of what happened and the solution to it. There's no time to think about the piece. And therefore, I would invite uh, any conductor to try to play in his instrument what he can play, because the rhythmical feeling, the rhythmical aspect of this piece is so organic that you need to feel it in your body at some point. Um, Everything on a desk can be dangerous. That at least is my experience. I find that it's like a double security that you can have in order to keep uh, your your concentration. But what you don't want to happen in this piece is to be thinking for a second, what was that? There's that is the step you don't want. So you are conducting, something happens, you process, and that's direct. And then you go back, you fix it, and that's how you gain immediately the confidence of the orchestra. Another advice is, don't start, of course, with the Sacre. Not that no orchestras will give you that possibility, but do step by step. Do Firebird, do Petrushka, do the other pieces. Symphony in Three Movements, very good one, and then go to Sacre. Sami is asking about the ballet. Well, I have to be honest. I think this piece is done 90% of the time as a concert piece. So in that respect, of course, you are free. I haven't had the possibility to conduct this piece with the ballet, unfortunately. I know my colleague Prudencio did recently, but of course there was a centenary. By the way, I think the premiere was the 26th of May, so we are very close. Um, and yes, there are some considerations, but every choreography I've seen on YouTube, at least, the tempos seem pretty straight on, with the exception of the huge stretch at the very end of Don Sacral, where you, they have to make time to bring her up, at least in the original choreography. But that's always an issue that you have to think of. And I don't think this is a repertoire enough piece for the ballet, that there are conventions that they will distort the music. Not distort, that's a rough word. Alternate to slower tempos, pas de deux in Swan Lake, and things like that. Where you feel that the music is following a choreography. Ah, okay. Now I understand the question of Fernando. Um, are there limits in this notation in Sacre, and are they a precursor for the notation of the contemporary composers? Not at all, because once composers felt comfortable with polymetrical information, they just went. Who can I think of? Lutoslavsky, for instance, is somebody who is always having a very free rhythmical notation, and Stravinsky, in a way, he was the beginning. But my God, I mean, what a beginning! It's like you had to conceive this monster. By the way, there are some interesting conversations with Monteux and also with Ansermet about, for instance, Ansermet wanted to rebar the very end, when the Gran Casa goes in two. Da, 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 da. He wanted everything in two. He said, why writing this in three? And Stravinsky didn't quite answer, but he told other people that, look, it's going to make it more complicated for the orchestra. However, there are some stories of Kusevitzky who did 142 in 3/8. Oh, ja, 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 ja. I mean, it's like, and apparently it was something that was possible at that time. So it was all starting. There was no score of this piece until the 20s. So when you conducted the ballet, you received the autograph. Can you imagine that? Yeah. I think it was in the 20s, because it was the First World War, so there was a big confusion, just like now. Um, in the 20s, that Buzi finally printed this piece. Um, we're going to speak a little bit of 142. Now I'm going to go back to my desktop, and I do apologize for the old-fashioned way of notating this, but it did the job. And this is going to be very quick. How to learn this the fastest way? Okay, here is the most important information. We are starting right after the fermata. So this is 142 in case you can't see it. And this is the first 216. And I want you to look at these four measures because they contain pretty much everything you need to know about the first half of the first section. Most important one is the last measure. So when you study a piece of Stravinsky, always look for the common denominator. Yes, what is always repeated, and what is always repeated in the pristine form. It never changes. So you have one before 143, fourth measures of 143, one measures before 145, and so forth. It's always the same story. Pam, pam, pam. Okay? Good. So once you have understood that, I would really literally take that measure and put it on my desk. Yeah, you can do it whichever way you want and just go backwards. Don't go narrative with Stravinsky. Just look at little pieces. So what is happening before this measure? So we are now in 143. One measure before 143. You have two bars of 3/16, right? Da, da, pa, 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 and one of two. So he's playing with 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and pa, pa, pa. Now, if you look at the ballet in the original choreography, she's jumping 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and in the pam, 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 she does a gesture. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, something like this. So it's like a slow, like a statue like gesture, and then she starts jumping again. So it had the definite identity for both Stravinsky and Nijinsky. um, then you have the same set repeated exactly the same way. So this is phrase one, this is phrase two. Okay, we don't know exactly how this music operates, but we know there's a downbeat here. Unfortunately, there is no downbeat here. That doesn't help us. And there is this big downbeat from the trumpets in the 2/8. The second version, we have one extra trombone and the same downbeat from the brass. Unfortunately, no timpani. It's here, it's not here. In terms of structure, it's exactly the same. Okay, now comes the B section. We are going to discuss this in a minute, but I want to stay focused with this type of music, yeah? It's like the cell of this piece. Here we go. Third version of pam pam pam. Here is our downbeat of the trumpets. What happens beforehand? Now, this is where you can again be fooled by numbers. You say, oh, it's different. It's 2/8 and 3/16. How do I conduct that? Okay, fine. You can do that. Or you can start counting what is happening in the music. This bar is the same, but there is 1/16 missing. So in other words, he just took his scissors and threw 1/16 away from this measure, which became a 2/8. So it's exactly the same. 2, 3, and here you have 2 and 2. Okay? Of course, you conduct this the way it's written. There's no question about it. It's just to understand how he composes. Last version, is it the same? Let's see. 2, 3, 2/8. Same. No problem. So you have version 1, repeat it. with a little bit of differences here in the orchestration. Version 2, repeated also without any major differences here and here. Now let's go to the middle. What is the main character of the middle? We have this tam pam pam pam. Sounds very similar to measure 145. Tan 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 tin tan. Here you can see it more clearly in the flute. Pam 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 pim pam. Pam pam pim pam. Okay, so we know this is a variation. But what happens before is not the same. This has pretty much no opening statement. This, on the other hand, has a preparation. However, this has nothing afterwards because it goes back to the original section, whereas here it has a little kind of postlude-like. So this, you can see how symmetrical he's thinking. If you look backwards here, it's basically like looking forwards here. You have a key change here, of course, but it's pretty much a 5 measure, a 5/16 altogether, and here you have also 5. No, you have 6 here. 144, you have 6, and here you have 5. Once you learn this, there's still this measure, which we don't know exactly how it works. Because here, let's go back. We are now and one measure before 146. Okay? So you have yours 316 and you have your 28. So it would be pretty much the same version as before. What happens here? Well, we have a new element. Yes, it's the timpani. Now we understand what this was. It's now he's really telling the whole story. Tam pam pam pam, tam pim. Okay, so here you have again our complete structure. Like here, is it 2? If we count from here, 2, 3, that's 5 plus. So in that respect, he's still working on this new opening of this piece, of this motive. Pam pam pim. So you have the full version is here, 147. 3, 2, I mean 3 and 16, 316, 216, 316, and the refrain. So what I do in 146, I imagine the timpani. 146, tam pa pam pim pa pam pim tam pim pam pim pa pam. It's exactly the same music, but the timpani appears only in 146, not in the first measure. And again, you see this symmetry of Stravinsky. 3 2 3 2 8, 3 2 3 2 8. And this is a little brother version. Yes, it's like only the opening of the motive, and he goes straight into the 2/8 motive. And to finish this, we have 148, which probably most of you know is a spoiler of the very end. Yeah, it's only stated once, and it interrupts with completely different music, completely different choreography, because now it's the group that takes over. This piece, by the way, it's interesting because you would think, oh, this is probably the whole ballet dancing. No, it's her. She is doing the. It would probably, my theory is that it would have been almost impossible with the group, but she's doing the main choreography, which what I explained before, and in 149 you have the group going with a step, da 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 da, did it, did it, did it, and this circle becomes gradually faster and faster, and then she starts dancing again in half step down. Um, as you can see, it goes pretty quickly. Maybe I went a little bit too quick, but I want to make sure that you know, uh, finally, this is about technique of organizing information. And if you do this in the correct way, I promise you, any of you can memorize this piece. It's not something magical. It is only if you focus in those numbers. Let me see how we're doing here. Um, going to ask a few more questions and we are going to close. I'm reading again if I missed some. Oh, Jonas. Hi, Jonas. How are you doing? Oh, yeah. How will you go about balancing the instruments in this particular place? Oh, that's a nasty one. Um, I think, Jonas, my best advice is to find always something interesting in the places that are very hard to hear. I, from experience, I find that if you give the musicians something, not that you want to take care of the balance, but you are doing it in a way that's because you care about the color, they will react much better than if you just simply say it's too bloody loud, right? So in this place, uh, the orchestra is tired in the performance, so you need to also take this into consideration. I would definitely encourage a very like marking dynamic, marking like the singer's marking, um, just making sure that we are going to work hard with the brain, but not insisting in the volume. If you can convince them that's in their best interest, the rehearsal is much easier to to uh, to feel the flow of things. A good hall helps, good rehearsing room too, and if you have the time, I would encourage some sectional work too in this piece. It's certainly worth it. Um, Probably not a professional orchestra, but definitely, or maybe even professional orchestra. But there are quite a few things that they need to look into. The tuning, the beginning is hard. They need, and if you are just going schnell, schnell, schnell all the time, can be also frustrating for them because they never have a chance to fine tune things. But definitely, this is my advice for. Oh, also, if you bring down the speed just ever so slightly, you will notice that it's easier to bring down the balance to the volume. Just a little trick there. Try experimenting with that and see if that helps you. Um, Hi, Sebastian. The structure, mm, would that be too daring to say that it's a rondo? You have until 49, you have the first section, which is very obvious, to me at least. Um, then you have a section, which is exactly the same in terms of music, just half a step down in 167. Finishes, then goes the wild section, 174, the one that we worked on today. That will be like a C. Um, and then it goes straight into a coda, really, because there are a lot of element of A, but it's completely a different version. And he's just taking now the timpani and it's becoming a full-blown motif, uh, which only appeared at the very end of the first section. Um, so once you have nailed the 142, you have pretty much taken care of the second part. P, do you keep always the long values in the crescendo in this sacral dance? Well, um, my advice is, because this is always a fight. No, who is late? Yeah, it's like, the strings are late. No, you're early. Don't fight it. Just go in the first rehearsal straight to 147 or 146, where you have the timpani deciding where the downbeat is. And he's pretty right on. Yeah, he knows the hall, he knows the people. So just work on the section couple of times there and then go back to the beginning. And somehow this will remain more in the collective unconscious. Oh, yeah, that's right. There is a downbeat here. Yeah. Because otherwise it becomes too technical. That it just it's almost like a matter of which technique they have. You know, if they're playing really short, they're playing a little longer. I can't give you a straight answer like all fits all, long, short, because it really depends on what hall you are. If you are in a resonant place, definitely not a good idea for this piece, by the way. Um, you just you just have to keep it shorter, as you know. And uh, I think that this is less of a problem as to what do they imagine where the downbeat is. And therefore, I encourage you to look into the timpani first in 146 and go back. Left hand. Um, hmm. Well, left hand is definitely you need it in this piece. There's no way you can just conduct with the right hand. Uh, I would help anything that has to do with balance with the left hand. And as you work, um, make sure that you are in a relaxed, try to, uh, in a relaxed way, so that you can be a little bit like a tone master. It's like, and just keep on encouraging things that are important, not only with the right hand, but the size of the right hand. So if there is a structured downbeat, I can give you an example, because we studied it, as a 192. That's a humongous downbeat. Yeah. So make sure that your proportions in the right hand are correct, so that you save this 1 meter gesture for this downbeat. And they will learn how to look at the right places. Yeah. Because the proportions are, if you're Don't just conduct huge da 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 da. It will help no one. Yeah, but there you can use the left hand in a very a clinical fashion. You just do the metrical changes, da 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 da. You know, something is like this is on stage almost. Yeah, this also comes from opera. It's like you are here, and then you give the cue to the singer who is there. Yeah, if they see this 3D difference between one hand and the other, it will also help them understand better. Okay, he's using this hand for that, and it's not some kind of a cue for everybody or forte or whatever. Yeah, the more we can see things by taking uh, at, um, useless elements before away, the better your conducting will be, the most efficient. Marco asked me, how was it the first time I conducted this piece? Um, well, think of yourself for a second. Um, Normally, Sacre is a piece that you program yourself. If I don't know many orchestras that invite you to conduct a Sacre, unless, of course, you are the music director. So that's one aspect. I was very fortunate because first of all, I remember my piano days. Like um, I never thought that I would start by playing Hammerklavier. You know that's insane. You know you have 32 sonatas, sorry, sonatas to play, and you have to go step by step. Of course, you know one is younger and everything, but you're looking at okay 110, you know all these masterpieces of his end period, like almost like a saint, and you know I have to play 6 7 pieces. So this is what I did with Stravinsky. I started, of course, like all of you, with Histoire du Soldat, and I went step by step, you know, Feuervogel, Firebird, and Petrushka, several times Petrushka before I did the Sacre. And the only thing I can tell you is that Sacre has a unique energy in the orchestra. Uh, you don't feel the orchestra like that in any other piece. I'm not sure what it is. I cannot describe it, but it's something. Um, they are never. There's never a sense of routine. That's the first thing. So that's good. Uh, the aggressive aspect is tiring, especially for the strings. So that's something that I noticed there. And I think I said that in the last class that I can't remember what the first half was. Oh, sorry, but it was something light because I knew I had this piece, and it was very hard to do because somehow it's hard. We spoke about it too. They say, hey, you know, after this we need to go home and have lunch. You know? So that's also something I didn't know when I studied the piece that would happen, and I believe that even today the public is like this. There's a sense of wow, like you need to sit on your chair afterwards and just pause for a second. That I mean, that's the amount of electricity it generates. Uh, of course, some people react very against it, you know, as you all know. And it never happens with Petrushka, it never happens with Firebird, but with this piece, yes. So that's also something to take into consideration when you program it. We are going to take very few. I think I've answered all of them. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to keep on doing this. I find it's very, very motivating for me to stay in touch with many of you who I can't see now. I mean, some of you I see regularly, but my former students from Basel, I really miss you a lot. And perhaps this is a way to keep on seeing each other, and it's an open channel, never-ending learning process for you, for me, for everybody. So make sure to stay tuned, and hope to see you next time. Bye bye.